Ready to rock? You good? Okay. We'll call this Apopka CRA meeting to order. I guess we can just jump right into it. Approval of minutes. Do we have minutes from April 16th and April 23rd? Need a motion from,
Mayor, I move we
Sure.
approve the minutes of April 16th and April 23rd, 2025.
got a motion by by Member Drago, second by Member Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries unanimously. All right, public comment. Any public comment? All right, presentations. Approval of the FY 2025 reallocated CRA budget. Bobby?
Good evening. At the April 23rd, 2025 CRA board meeting, the CRA board approved a list of projects that require reallocation of the fiscal year 2025 CRA budget in response to House Bill 991. Any valid and existing applications will be processed, and any funding needed for these applications will be paid for from the 5th Street and Park Avenue signal and pedestrian upgrades. Those would be existing facade renovation assistance program applications and building code assistance program applications as well that have been in the queue. Our recommended motion this afternoon, or should say this evening, is to approve the reallocation of the fiscal year 2025 for the CRA budget. There's one thing I'd like to point out is that the says artificial turf that should have been taken out. The turf was removed at the last meeting at the Action Sports amenity upgrade.
Which one was that?
On item 7, right here where you see the arrow.
And also I had asked you at the, I made mention at the agenda review, which one is that? The 400,000 land acquisition, because we all received an email from Kyle Becker, who sits, the former vice mayor who sits on the board. Quest is not interested at this time of considering to sell their parcel.
Right.
So having $400,000 sitting there for a parcel, we are not going to purchase. We need to reallocate those $400,000.
That would be the discretion of the board to determine what you want to reallocate that money to. So
with that, $400,000, I would do, capital improvement in the CRA district.
Okay.
Because we already have allocated for the facade and repair grant program.
Yeah, you have 30,000 dedicated for that. It's my understanding that that's the commercial programs, and then you have the 305 for the resident facade grant, or 362 for that one. So if you want to do capital programs like capital improvements, we probably need to know what type of capital program you're looking at. Would it be infrastructure repair?
30,000 for commercial.
Yes, that's what was discussed at the last meeting.
Well, the available funds versus the what we actually there's two different numbers, so it looked like we actually
The black
overspent.
is, yeah.
So if we remove the $400,000, we still have overspent. So it's more so balancing it.
Right.
What it looks like we'll be doing if we remove the $400,000.
Okay.
Because it's not like it's available funds anyway.
Right. Yeah. So your wish is our command.
All right. Any other questions?
Am I to understand the $400,000 is available to be reallocated?
It's not
No.
really available.
No.
It's not
The
available.
numbers,
It is available.
I thought that we balanced it perfectly.
That's exactly right.
We did balance it perfect.
Yeah, it
Yes,
was.
we did.
We spent a lot of time doing that.
As you can see on the screen here, everything was zeroed out, including that 400,000.
Yes.
So if we are not going to move forward with that, we do need to know where you want to allocate it to. And do you want to just put it in improvements and we come back to you with some additional improvement ideas?
Okay.
Is that appropriate?
Yes.
That's a good idea.
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
in looking over all these documents and listening to the debate last meeting on procedural matters relative to the residential facade program instead of the discussion on outcomes, I would recommend that the residential facade repair grant program have a budget of $600,000, and that the remaining of the 400,000 be allocated towards sidewalks in the northwest section of the city, which is in desperate need of sidewalks. Now, my rationale for the $600,000 is that when I looked at the PowerPoint presentation that the city presented to the county for an extension, the city only spent $4,500 on residential facade program in 10 years. There's now at the $30,000 limit, you can do 20 houses. You go down to Monroe Street, there's 10 houses there that can be done. Go on the south of Apopka, there's probably 10 more houses. So that gets you to 20 and 30,000. And when I read the program that the attorney presented relative to the grant program and all the improvements that can be done, I don't see how you can paint a house, do a roof, and add some windows for $10,000. I just don't see that. But 30,000 makes sense. And keep in mind, you have 4 months left in this year's budget. So I would think that the facade program, residential, should be able to complete those renovations within that 4-month period. Now, I know when we get to that a board item, you will discuss it in more detail. But at least the $30,000 gives the residents an opportunity to improve their property to the point where it reduces blight, because those houses are probably blighted. That would be my recommendation, Mr. Chair.
And so, remember, Drago, you said the other 200 went to where? I'm sorry.
The remainder of the money, you figure 238,000 goes to the facade program, 161,000 would go to sidewalks in the northwest section.
Not northwest, because that wouldn't be in the CRA.
Yeah, well, the section that's missing sidewalks, I was informed it was the northwest section of the CRA. I could be
the
wrong.
northwest section. Okay.
Okay.
Where would that?
Because we have the CDBG grants that did phase 1 and phase 2
Yeah.
of the CRA sidewalk program. So, and I know it's near.
Okay. No, I know. I think what there's the 3 blocks or 4 blocks that are north of 441 are in the CRA.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that a lot of those folks want sidewalks. I'm not disagreeing.
I understand. Well, I know also when you do sidewalk, you would have to include the drainage as part of the improvement elements.
Right, a lot of those are roads without any stormwater.
Right.
So I mean, we could put it in there, but I think you're going to get more pushback than you're going to get positive.
The other thing and maybe somebody can answer the question, that the city is installing some sidewalks now in some area of the city. And my understanding is that a portion of the sidewalks are poured at 6 inches and some are poured at 4 inches, which I don't understand the rationale behind that, because an extra 2 inches of concrete is not that much more expensive, but it adds more stability to the sidewalks, especially when vehicles climb the curb and put their tires on the sidewalk. If it's a 4-inch sidewalk, they're going to crack. Sidewalks are going to come up. You're going to have trip hazards. So if those sections are under the CRA and they haven't been poured, Mr. Chair, I would recommend they be poured at 6 inches instead of 4.
We'll follow up with the project manager.
And I'm not sure I don't think we have any discretion over. I don't know that we do.
I-
That CDBG grant, I think it's whatever it is. I don't think we can.
Yeah, but the grant only pays for the money. It doesn't pay for the design
No,
relative to the construction.
Yeah,
It covered
did,
all the
yes.
costs, but I'll follow up with the project manager to see if that's actually
Yeah,
what
I
is
mean,
occurring.
I know that what we've done in the past, like there was some sidewalks in front of Lakeville Elementary. A lot of as you say, a lot of cars were parking on the sidewalks. So I did I said, listen, let's pour those at 6 inches. Now that was city dollars, not CRA dollars. I guess, have Blanche look into that. But there are plenty of places where 6 inch makes plenty of sense.
Right.
I understand your point there.
Okay. So are we he has a recommendation. Or we-
So, I mean, are there other places we could put sidewalks? Probably. I mean, if that's the way the board wants to go, I'm perfectly fine with that. If there's another, um, if we want to just do the 200,000 for adding to the residential renovations,
making it
and maybe
six.
let's hold back to 200 and let's figure out there's another.
What's the best use for it?
Does that sound?
I think so.
Does that work for everybody?
So we're adding 200,000.
200,000
to
to
To the
the
residential.
He said to make it 600,000, which
600,000.
adds about 237,000, and the
Okay.
remainder of the 400 is about
Right.
64,000.
Because maybe one of these other properties comes available that we hadn't, counted on, and so it'd just be nice to, to have something, some available funds for that. Okay.
Okay.
So if
Do we want to move any additional funds into the commercial facade renovation program? Since there's only 30,000 there, and
I-
I think that's been starting to kind of pick up a little more steam though recently.
Well, according to the
I-
Mr. Shepherd, who I talked to before the meeting, there's not a policy on the commercial end of it. I looked at the residential because we discussed it at the last couple of meetings. And again, there's only 4 months left in the budget year. So before long, I mean, staff's gonna develop a new, staff's gonna start to develop a new budget for next year.
Right.
And that's when you can look at putting a sizable amount of money in the commercial facade program relative to the policy that the board would adopt.
Bob, you want, or Cliff, you want to?
Yeah, Mr. Gregg, I apologize. I think you misunderstood. What I was saying is the document that is supposed to address residential contains a typo on one of the pages where it references accidentally the CRA commercial grants policy, which should have been CRA residential policy. It's a typo.
Okay.
So there may be, I'm not aware, a commercial grants policy, but there's not one to apply to this grant program that we're just creating because this is a brand new program.
Okay.
Bobby, do you have any idea about how much money we've already put into the commercial facade program?
Off the top of my head,
You have it for this year and the past 4 years.
the past 4 years, I couldn't say, but since I've been involved, I would say probably 50 grand just off the top of my head. I mean, I can get you an exact number, but just that's a ballpark.
How long have you been involved?
Since last summer.
Since last summer, so 50,000 since last summer.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have had a couple of applications that come through. On average, for the commercial ones, we're probably looking at around $4,500 is what the grant amount usually is. That's the average amount. And we have two commercial. Well, actually, we have the building code assistance program. I think that's a $5,000 max, and then the facade renovation assistance program, and I think that's about a $5,000. There was another one that's the $15,000 max current in the former budget. Yeah.
I think one of the issues or concerns that I actually had with the program was that it was being used to renovate the property to sell it for a profit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as we're looking at changing up some of the terminology to make sure that the residents are using the program as allocated, I think we also need to make sure that we put some type of language in there that if they sell the property within an X amount of time, that they actually, reimburse those funds to the city.
Is that specific to the residential or the commercial side?
Commercial side.
Okay.
And remember, Bobby mentioned when he first came up, for those pending applications, we're taking that funding out of the Fifth Street project. So if we need additional funding in any of those programs that we kind of reallocated funds from, we're taking it from that particular project.
That's my thought. Okay.
Okay?
And then do we still have a portion of this that's being paid for CRA policing as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
80,000.
Is that well funded? Is that being completely used? Are we not using enough of it?
Well, we have 85,000 that's committed to that for this fiscal year.
Do you know how we're
And-
looking on that?
They haven't requested any more at this point, so I think we're good, but I can look into it. But again, if it runs short, we'll take it from that particular project.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, so I think we have a motion, a second, but we need to bring up any public comment on the CRA budget.
have a question about line 2 and 3.
Name and address for the record, please.
Dr. O, Apopka, Florida. Line 2 and 3. Um, how do those address blight? Shouldn't they be under Public Works and not under the CRA? If we're addressing blight with the CRA, that's $325,000 that could be used to address blight in the city and improve the quality of life and the appearance of the city and draw people to town. That's a very important thing we need done. But I think that we're spending $325,000 that could be addressing other issues. I really think that that money needs to be found somewhere else, and you need to be using that $325,000 in other places. So I'd like y'all to address that.
Anybody else?
What did she say? Lines 2 and 3.
Leroy Bell, Mount Helen. I see the proposal and what's been accepted over here, or whatever, but it only seems to be up at Alonzo William Park. You're just spending a fraction of what you're spending up on Edwards Field. It would seem that you would be trying to do, as to Phyllis' point, over on this side, that you could be doing more for Blightness from 6th Street out up to Hawthorne, up around Alonzo William Park. It just don't seem fair that you're spending all this money on one side and not equally on the other side. And even when there still was a lawsuit that was did by Lafayette Dardell, they're still sitting out there and the judgment ain't never been made on it. That this side need to be brought up to par with this side before you move forward. So I would hope you consider putting more on the Blightness on this side as you're doing on Edwards Field.
Rogers back at 7 West Main Street. I guess the thing that I'm looking at all the particular suggested projects, my question is, how does it increase the value of the CRA? Because it looks like it's more, I guess, government property, but how does it really benefit the community at the end of the day, right? So I know they mentioned about sidewalks in the northwest corridor of the CRA. I know I've mentioned in previous times extending sidewalks along Lake Avenue, which portion of it would be in CRA, portion of it would not, which would hope with, just making pedestrian more friendly. But my thing is, when you really look at it, and when you look at the downtown, specifically, let's say Station Street, we have the seaboard or whatever it is been sitting there in this condition for quite some time. You have buildings along that's been, in disrepair. Has it been an effort to reach out to those property owners to make those areas look better? Because I know it's been a lot of talk about Station Street, a lot of talk about, the new housing that's going to go in. So has it been a concerted effort as opposed to, it feels like we're just throwing money to meet maybe the deadline that was initially we were up against, but I think that hasn't went away. But my thing is, how does it really impact the value and attack the blight? Because if this is what the money was set up for, I don't see how pickleball courts, basketball courts, I don't see how that really impacts the area. I see how it can be as far as bringing attraction to the area, but is it going to really impact the quality of life for the residents that's actually paid into the program? So that's just my specific request on It may not change today, but in the future, I think we really need to look at avenues to make that better. And then the other thought was, like I mentioned in a previous conversation, we've housed several of the palm trees that's been cut on 441. I don't know, is it going to come from CRA money or is it coming from a tree bank? So those, again, if we're looking at blight, that can be looked at as blight. So I think we really need to take a deeper dive at what we have and do a proper assessment to drill down in what can make the areas better long term, because we're talking about increasing the tax base. Thanks.
I, I have a quick question. Bradley, for Alonzo William Park, I know we spoke about the running water, and you said you were going to try to see if you can get a bid on what that looked like or an estimate on the cost of that. 'Cause
We're gonna
that's
bring
something.
we're gonna bring that back for the FY26 budget presentation,
Okay.
and it was to add ability for power hookups for special event use and potable water hookups for special event use.
Okay. Is that something we can do at the CRA?
It's Alonzo William Park is in the CRA. Yes.
So, did you have an estimate on what?
Initially, we were looking around the $50,000 mark,
Okay. So, is that something that we think we should budget
but
for?
we
'Cause
can.
I know in the CRA, it's for the for
yeah.
next
Yeah.
for the
absolutely.
water.
Absolutely.
For the there's no water power hookup at the Alonzo William Park. When they have events and stuff, they're not able to use any water.
There's a water fountain out at the basketball courts. What we're speaking of is for the special events that are happening
Yeah,
out
they
there.
can't use the water fountain.
There's no water spigots for the special
So there's
events
no water hookup, just a water fountain
or power
or
outlets.
power outlets. So they have to use generators and food trucks and.
Yeah.
Sylvester Hall, 3091 Rolling Hills Lane. It's kind of funny because I don't brought that up many times, and thank you for rehashing it again. And we talk about it like, when we go over there at the amphitheater, when we have vendors over there, we got the electrical hookup and we got the water hookup for the vendors, not water spigots and drinking fountains. That needs to be put there. And I don't brought it up multiple times. And the only reason they haven't been put there is because it's yours truly who's bringing it up, Mayor. So let's just be real with it. That should have been done long time ago. It don't happen, as Leroy said, on the north side. When we build it correctly, and we build it professionally for the people to come out there and participate. On the other thing about this, just piggybacking off of what Mr. Rogers said, when we look at this thing as a whole, and we zone it off, how many of us ride around the whole zone and look at how can we apply this to do exactly what Roger just said, to make a impact, where it's going to make the area better. Look at some of the businesses that need assistance and say, this is what we're supposed to be doing for our city. But we sit around clueless waiting to everybody to bring the information to us. And then when we disperse the money out, we're just giving it out with no direct overview of what we're trying to get accomplished and what we're trying to make the city improve the city on. Those things have to stop. Now, for the residents, I want to make sure that I'm completely clear for the record. The residents do not have to put any input when they bring their claim, and to my understanding, it's up to $20,000. They don't have to pay anything into that.
That's the next item.
What you mean that's the next item?
That's the next item. We're talking about what that.
It shouldn't be a next item because we
the next
already
item on the agenda.
we already had agreed on it. They had to pay nothing. Mayor, we can spend $2.5 million for.
It's
No. Let me talk. It's my little time to talk. Let me talk. We can spend $2.5 million on a trail and nobody put any skin in the game. But as soon as we spend a little money to improve the lives of the resident, they got to have some skin in the game. Come on, Mayor, you got to do better. So we had already came to agreement that the $20,000 and they had to put nothing in it. So now we
next item on the agenda.
we revisiting that situation where we shouldn't even have it on the agenda because it already had been a done deal. But now we bringing it back on the agenda because we want to have some skin in the game because America.
We're,
2.5 million on 2.5 million, no skin in the game. And you just hate to see 400,000
going to the resident with no with them not putting skin in the game. Man, make it make sense. So feedback had got to me that a couple guys came up and they was looking into making a claim, and they was told they had to pay a certain amount. If they wanted to get the money, they had to pay a certain amount. So that's why I'm bringing this up to verify this,
It's on the
and
next item.
that's why I'm
Sylvester,
bringing it. That's why I'm
Sylvester,
bringing it up to
it's the next
verify this,
item on the
because
agenda.
at the last meeting that we had, that wasn't the
Okay.
case,
All
and
right.
so
It's in
things shouldn't be changed as we go along. It shouldn't be changed.
Just listen. Okay, anybody else? Gosh. Okay, we've got a motion and a second to add $200,000 to the residential.
It's to add, to bring the residential up to
Right.
600,000,
Up to 600,000, and we're going to take out the property
the
Alonzo
land
Williams
acquisition,
Park
yes.
addition.
And
Okay.
are we going to put the $50,000 for the London William Park? The
For the
$50,000.
50,000, that's up,
Sure.
okay, so, so that'll reduce what's going to the sidewalks.
Okay.
Okay.
But
Okay,
then what are we doing with those remaining funds then too?
Goes to the sidewalk.
sidewalks,
Sidewalk.
But what sidewalks?
I guess we're just going to identify.
We'll bring it back. We have to bring it back.
yeah, he
So,
said something about north.
Yeah.
I thought we were
west.
going to look a little bit further to see if it made sense for it to go to sidewalks or something else, which I think at this point that would be a little more efficient to do, to understand what we really
Yeah.
need to put it towards
Mhm.
Yeah.
instead of designating it to unknown sidewalks.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay,
I agree.
sidewalks or
Right.
any other viable
any other.
project
Okay.
that is determined, okay?
All right. So we got a motion and a second.
So, okay, so it's 600,000 for the residential facade program.
Yep.
And then we're adding Alonzo Park 50,000.
50,000.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And then
And that leaves us with how much?
you'll have 70, 50, wait,
112,000.
13,000 going to,
What will you have?
113,000 going to sidewalks.
113?
Yes,
Or whatever.
I'm here
maybe.
12.
For the Alonzo Williams Park project, how many vendors does that support? What's the details of that? I know we're not like deep into it, but you have a rough number. How many trucks does that provide?
No, the thought would be, because we did just renovate that field, that playing field. The thought would be to place them along the fence line, the hookups.
On
So
the
we're
outside
still
of the fence or the
no
inside?
inside park fence.
Okay.
So we're still working out the logistics of how many can fit there, and then, like the mayor said, power differences versus a hookup for a truck versus a tent vendor. So we need to
Because
decide.
yesterday at the Emancipation Day celebration, they weren't up near the fence line. They were all the way up near the building. So
Right. So again,
it
with
seemed
that,
like that was a better use of how programs would go. So if we're going to do it that way,
yeah. So with the new field out there, we're still trying to figure out the best fit for that area.
And the $50,000 would probably definitely be enough to.
That's kind of where we're at right now. Yeah.
Okay.
And my numbers are rounded. So
Yeah. Right. Okay. All right. Motion second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Next up, Cliff.
All right, so I'm here to go over the facade grant program that has been at least tentatively devised since our last meeting, to discuss some of the details and flesh out some others that will still need to be fleshed out. I want to immediately jump to the point that was being raised incorrectly by Mr. Hall. As you'll find out, there's no requirement for matching funds with this grant.
I don't think he was saying. I don't want to mischaracterize that. He wasn't saying that it was for sure. He just wanted to confirm.
That's what my presentation is
Okay.
about.
I don't want you to say that he was wrong. He just wanted to confirm.
Okay. There's no skin in the game requirement. What there is a couple of different documents, and I want to get those in front of the screen if I can figure out how to do that. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see. Yeah, how do I? The first one I want is this one, the residential facade program. Okay. All right. So this should have been provided to all of you. And what we did is took the information that was provided through the workshop and the discussions, and we tried to come up with some descriptions of what a program would look like. So in these 5 pages of descriptors, if any of this doesn't match up with your vision, then this is what you tell us. But we worked off of the minutes and the tape or recording of the proceedings. So that's why we did what we did. And so the first thing that I highlighted here, at least for my benefit, is the program is designed to encourage the rehabilitation, repair, and restoration of street-facing building elements that contribute to the visual character and stability of neighborhoods. Grants are offered on a reimbursement basis. That means they do the work is completed, the funds are then distributed on a reimbursement basis. But as you will see, at least as proposed, it's interim payments along the way based on a percentage of completion, 30, 60, 90, and then 100. So when I say reimbursement, I'm not saying that the person who's receiving the grant has to have spent all the money. What I'm saying is we don't give money until there's work to pay for at the 30, 60, 90, and 100% level. So that's what that means. And these are intended to support property owners in completing exterior upgrades that are compatible with local design standards and consistent with the objectives outlined in the adopted CRA redevelopment plan. So that's kind of the first big point. This is what the program is designed to do, and it doesn't have a matching component element to it. The reason that's important is because if you look at the second section here, one of the things we found, you all mentioned that I was unaware of this, but that y'all had a facade grant program, but had very few, if any, applicants, maybe one or so. And that is because under your plan, these grants are matching grants. So you get a dollar for dollar match, and that is dissuasive to people who do not have the money to put up in the first place to be matched. So if you adopt this program, one of the things you will need to do, if you go down to the recommendation here, is amend your plan. Because as it currently reads, it would have to be a matching plan, a matching grant to be under your plan. But you can amend that and get that in your plan so it's a non-matching grant, okay? And there's a whole procedure there that's spelled out as to how to go about doing that. The next significant, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in this memo, but the significant stuff is the legal authority for this. And the statute that provides for this kind of a program says under 163.370 that you can spend TIF, tax increment funds, on carrying out plans for a program of voluntary or compulsory repair and rehabilitation. Those two words are significant, of buildings or other improvements. Now, this is not limited, based on the language, to commercial buildings, although many of the grant programs around the state focus on commercial buildings. So I'm using the ability that the statute gives me to say you can apply this to residential programs because there's nothing that tells me otherwise. And one of the things that you also have authority to spend money on is to contract with any person, public or private, in making and carrying out such plans. So if we had our own contractors, as an example, this would be in order to get buildings repaired and rehabilitated, which essentially means code enforcement, but it's a little more leeway than that. Bring things up to snuff. This is authority in the statute, so that if you got an audit, you'd be able to justify this expenditure. All right, so under eligible projects, there are things that are non-negotiable. The first, obviously, it has to be within the CRA boundaries, wherever those are. And that doesn't matter which part of the CRA, it just has to be in the CRA boundaries. You're needing to improve visible blight, deterioration, or code issues. Why is that important? Why is it visible and why is that important? It is because the whole idea of CRAs and CRA money is that what people see is essentially what they believe. And so if you go into a neighborhood that looks run down, then you're less likely to want to stay there or go there or patronize businesses there and so forth. So things that are helpful and that are good for the owners are not necessarily good from the CRA's perspective. Example, maybe the building should need new wiring. Maybe inside the building, there are problems with walls that need patching and things of that nature. But if I'm driving by, I don't see any of that stuff. So these grants typically focus on exterior improvements. And the improvement, it says, must be permanent. Now, that's a bit of a stretch because painting is never impermanent. But for the most part, you understand, in the context of an improvement, it's permanent because it's not going anywhere until it's repainted. And it has to be consistent with your redevelopment plan. Now, in terms of the things that we recommend should be eligible to spend these funds on, whatever max you put on it, 10, 20, 30, it doesn't matter. But these are the kinds of things that if you had an applicant coming forward to you, that you would want to consider, this is a good idea to spend money here. And so exterior surface treatment. So what would that be? That'd be repainting, residing, tuck pointing, which I had to look up. If you don't know, it's filling in masonry joints with where concrete has come out, putting more mortar and concrete in those joints, or similar cosmetic improvement, repair or replacement of existing exterior doors, windows, and shutters, repair or replacement of existing awnings and canopies, roof repairs or replacements, and things that contribute to the aesthetics of the facade, but are visible from the right of way. Refurbishment of existing front porches, stoops, stairways, and railings. Accessibility improvements, things like handicap access. If you've got a stairs going up and there needs to be some handicap access for that would be an exterior improvement. So, and demolition, which is a separate item, that's something you can spend money on. Site clearing and demolition is separately called out in the statute as an appropriate expenditure of TIF. So that's that. Other eligible improvements you may want to consider, and you'll understand what I'm talking about consider because we don't have anything firm in terms of your decisions yet, are restoration of decorative features that are exterior, such as cornices, trims, and architectural details, installation, excuse me, or repair of exterior lighting fixtures that enhance the facade and improve safety, installation of front lawnscaping and irrigation, lawn landscaping, installation, repair, replacement of brick or textured driveways or walkways, removal, replacement of front yard fences, signage improvements, and so on. Those are all things you might want to consider, as are the other ones. You can include or exclude any of these, but these are ideas for you to consider. In terms of what are ineligible expenditures, the ineligible expenditures, if you follow our recommendations, would be interior modifications. Again, not saying they're not valuable, it's just that they don't accomplish the goals of the CRA. So interior modifications such as upgraded ACs, repainting interiors of houses, upgrading kitchens, et cetera, et cetera. Not that they're unvaluable, but they're unvaluable from a standpoint of what a TIF is supposed to be spent on.
Is that that's not specific to residential, correct? That's for
yes,
any
this is
CRA
residential.
dollars.
So I guess my question with that is, we have spent probably over $300,000 of CRA funds for commercial to upgrade their AC units and brand new AC units. So
That has
so
been
for
spent.
residential, that has been spent. So for residential, it's not recommended for residential. But
It's
for
not
commercial,
recommended for any, and I didn't know you'd spend it. But
we've spent
Yeah,
a lot of money
I
on
would-
new AC units. That's what we
There's been
spent. Most
quite
of
a
the money
few.
has spent on AC units. For
yeah. Look, I'm the CRA guy. I've been to 2 CRA meetings here, this one and the last one. So if you'd asked me, I would have told you that's not what you do with commercial grants. You don't. It's all about what you can see that causes people to come to the area. That's why community policing innovations, not just police, but innovations, is what you can spend money on. What does that mean? Well, it might mean cops on bicycles. It might mean programs where cops meet at a community center and can talk to youth. It might mean a number of things, but it's not just we have cops out here.
So I guess my question is, who approved the AC
I
units?
don't have a clue.
Does anybody have a clue who approved for the AC? I mean, because it was over $300,000 spent on AC units.
For
So
what? For whom? I don't know.
1 second.
I don't
I'll
know,
look it up.
Bobby.
It's been a lot of AC units.
and it's been a lot of years.
It's been a
too.
lot of AC units in the
So
past.
what happens in this scenario where the board has spent funds?
Nothing happens unless there's an audit.
Weird.
It's
So
just-
the answer is I don't know how it happened or why it happened. I have no idea about any of that stuff. But it is not like commercial gets a special pass and residential doesn't. It's the same rules.
Well, we said the same rules, but we haven't applied the rules.
I'm
And we have been approving AC units, hundreds
Okay.
of thousands of dollars in AC units for commercial buildings, for
Okay.
for-profit entities.
So let me put it in simple terms that everybody should understand. Just because somebody did it wrong once doesn't mean you get to do it
Well,
wrong
we did it
again.
wrong more than once. We did it
Well,
wrong.
well, that's
or
not,
10 times.
and I don't think that's the point
the
that's trying to be made now.
and-
I don't think we're trying to continue that. It's what's the repercussion that we did it wrong back then?
There are none unless you're audited. If there's an audit, there could be findings. I do not have a clue what those would be. I don't know anything about this program at all.
So
Aren't you-
walk us through like a scenario of a different municipality that's gone through misspent funds.
So
All right, I can give you an example. Satellite Beach, which no longer has a CRA, is a former client, and because they no longer have a CRA and this was all settled, I can explain to you how they did it. They had a situation where they had CRA funds, and they had certain group of elected officials who, sort of on a wave of populism, got elected. This was maybe 10 years ago. And you might have heard of the Tea Party. These were all Tea Party folks. And they saw a big hunk of money in the CRA and said, hey, we're going to use this to get some more cops. We're going to use this to do some stuff that we want that are general fund expenditures. And because they had the votes and the control, they did it. After one term in office, the vast majority of them got kicked out of office. But now the county, who has a stake in where the money gets spent, said, hey, what's happening here? And they were concerned. That's when, in fact, they first hired me. Said, hey, how do we get out of this mess? What happened is we went to the county. We said, essentially, this is what's happened. This is the amount that's happened. We will although we have a CRA where you have to give us money, we'll give it back to you each year until we are paid back the amount that was ill spent. And there was never a JLAC, or Joint Legislative Auditing Committee, audit. Instead, the parties, in this case, the county and the city, reached an agreement about how they would make it right, and that's what they did.
So it may have to come out of our general fund in some capacity to be able to repay maybe some misappropriated funds or misspent funds.
If it becomes an issue, it could. Again, I hesitate to be certain because I haven't seen the program. I don't know what justifications were, and I don't want to judge something without ever seen any of it or even knowing about it till today. But that's what could happen.
So those programs, if I recall, were instituted under the prior director. There were, public hearings on those particular programs, and when we revisited the CRA plan, my understanding at that time was that those documents in that program had been reviewed by you or someone. But if that's not the case, I think where we are now, it's probably beneficial to move on with your presentation and to
Happy to do
until
so.
we have more information or
I will do
unless
as
anything
much
else.
CRA stuff as y'all want me to. But again, I've been in this meeting and the last one, and up till that, I don't know that I've been in any CRA meetings, even though I certainly have the ability.
Well, so and I'm happy to move on for time's sake, but let's come back to this. If you can review our expenditures to understand where we may have gone astray here, and then give us some advisory opinions back of what we need to fix.
No problem. In fact, I'd be happy to give a CRA overview. I did that before when I was here the first time as city attorney, so people would understand, okay, this is what CRAs are supposed to be doing. This is what your functions are.
But I want you to look at our expense, what we've spent as well, please.
Yeah, sure.
So that we know where we're at, what's happened, and make sure that we're on the up and up.
And
That's a good idea.
And the CRA, from my understanding, does, because I'm looking at this CRA audit report. So the CRA, actually, there's an audit report here, and I don't, financial statement of the and there's no findings. So are you familiar with this audit report?
I'm familiar with the fact that every CRA is annually supposed to have an audit. And the CRA auditor is supposed to certify as a part of his or her or its findings that you, as a CRA, have met all the eligibility requirements for expenditures of TIF under 163. That is supposed to be a part of every finding. But what I can also tell you is there are many auditing firms who have no clue about this particular thing. And if they audit it like a general government audit, they see no issue. But they have to be specifically familiar with the requirements of 163.370, 163.387, sub 6, and so on, which tell you what you can spend money on, because they're supposed to make a finding that the city is in compliance. And I'm guessing they made such a finding. So if there is an issue, that would be a question to go back to your auditor and say, hey, what's going on here? I don't know. I don't even know how the auditor is. So I'm not trying to point fingers. But this is a requirement. I can show you in the statute where it says they are supposed to make that finding.
They didn't make the finding. I just looked at it. So.
Okay, can I continue?
But you can move forward.
Okay, so again, among ineligible expenditures, we say, or we recommend. These mean that we think they're questionable, but y'all may have a different opinion, because until some people take the attitude, and I understand it, well, until a judge tells then I'm going to assume yes. I'm telling you, I think a judge would tell you no, but I could be wrong. General property maintenance, repair and upkeep, such as cleaning gutters and such as that. Non-fixed improvements, such as fixtures and equipment like ACs, furniture, decorations, security systems, improvements in progress or performed prior to grant approval. So you don't get the work done and then come get the grant. You get the grant and then you go do the work and then you apply for reimbursement. Refinancing existing debt. Soft costs such as licensing, permit fees, impact fees, architecture, engineering costs, and so forth. Work that's not pre-approved or tied to blight elimination. Some gentleman asked earlier, how is this eliminating blight? This is what this program is designed to do. So if you ask the question, does this expenditure not and somehow lead to the elimination of slum or blight, then it's a question you should be asking as to whether or not this should be a part of the eligible expenditures and so forth. Or work performed by an unlicensed contractor. Now, if you follow our recommendations, that won't be possible because next point, y'all told me to give two options. So we did. Option one, let me scroll down here so you can see it. Option one, owners select their own contractors. These contractors, as long as they're licensed and insured, and one other important requirement, they enter an agreement with the CRA in which they agree that all of their payment will come from the CRA directly issued to them upon the processing of a proper payment application that includes lien releases or waivers, partial and full. And that the suggested percentages we came up with, but you could certainly come up with different ones, was 30, 60, 90, and then the final. And there would be forms for all of this that the contractor, when he was ready at 30% and had passed inspections, he'd have, here's what we have done. Here are the contractors that signed off. Here are the subcontractors' partial lien releases. Here's my own lien release. And if all that's passed, then they get the 30% payment as we structured it, less 10% retainage. The same at 60, the same at 90. And at 90, by 90, if you've done it correctly, you're holding back the last 10% plus 30 more percent, 10 from the prior three draws. So in the last payment, they would get a total of 40% of the overall contract upon final lien waivers and releases from everybody, subcontractors, material, and so forth, contractor's affidavit, and passage of final inspection, and either, and this would be a John Hanson question, a CO, if that's appropriate, or certificate of completion, if that's appropriate, or whatever certificate comes from the inspections that says, yeah, all this is up to code and passes inspection. So that's option one. Option two is exactly the same in terms of how you get paid and what you agree to, but y'all would pre-vet by having an RFQ, a request for qualifications, of people who are interested or contractors who are interested in doing this kind of work, and then you would pick a number, let's say 5. You say, okay, these 5, we've read their qualifications, they all are insured, they all have proper licensing, they don't have any disciplinary matters pending against them, and so forth and so on. And so we can then say with this list, if you want to use one of our pre-approved contractors, we know they meet all the criterion, and as a part of the RFQ, they would agree that they would assign this agreement with the city that they will seek payment from the city or CRA through the CRA grant program, not the homeowner. And that's important because you do not want to get the homeowner in a situation where it's over their head and now they're being asked to pay twice because they paid and now the city's paying. And that's a real important factor in why, if we are going to do this in a way that's responsible, monitoring the payments and making sure that all the right documentation is gotten, the work is completed to a certain level, and inspections are passed. That's why. So whether you bring your own contractor who is licensed and insured, or you use one that's approved by the city that's licensed, insured, and vetted to a degree, no guarantees, but as much as we can, you know that the payment process for either option is the same. And that way, in theory, the homeowner or the property owner is protected as much as we can protect them. So that's the overview kind of the program. Now, when I got down here to contractor requirements, I already went through this, but these are the kind of things that are in this document that we're going to get to last about how they're going to handle payments. They pass all relevant inspections, submit properly completed play applications, lien waivers, final contractor's affidavit, post a notice of commencement. That's something you post on the site at the beginning of the job so that people know that people are working and know where to file notices of liens and such as that. And the last thing we have on here is there should be a time frame. So once you get approved for a grant, for a facade grant, it should have a tick on it. Now, whether that tick is a year or 2 years or 3, that's for y'all to decide. But it should have some period that if they haven't gotten the work done in that time frame, the grant goes away, unless you agree to extend it for some sort of extenuating circumstance. Okay, and so you just don't want an open-ended grant that goes on forever, that you never call out, but the stuff never gets finished. And and the way this is structured, that shouldn't happen, only because there's really no motivation to sit there. Now, the other part that I had that I wanted you to see here, yeah, this is what the grant recipient would sign. This is like the contract between us and a successful grant awardee. Before I even get into any of what's here, what's not here is as important, because these are the things that you will decide, and these will ultimately come the grant policy for these residential grants. For example, right now, there is nothing in this document that says how you qualify. Is there going to be an income maximum? Like, you have to be making less than fill in a blank number in order to qualify, or does it not matter as long as you own property in the CRA that needs some fixing up? I don't know. That's a policy question. But right now, I don't have that drafted because I don't have that input from you. Other things that are not here. Is there going to be a restriction, which you could impose, that if they choose to use their own contractor, the contractor can't be related by blood or marriage or whatever familial restriction you want upon it? Again, policy question, not an issue for me. And other things like that that you think are relevant for your program when someone comes and applies, so that the people who administer the program, and I don't know who that would be under Radley, but somebody who says, okay, check, 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 they qualify, or check, 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 they don't. But they got to know what makes them qualified. And if you want to be, it's basically the only qualification is you own property in the CRA that needs fixing up. Okay, again, those are the decisions you have to make. But this agreement, with or without those qualifications or whatever you come up with, is the agreement that they would sign off on, acknowledging, what is the amount that they've been granted? Because even if you have a maximum of 30, some projects may be $5,000 projects, some might be $15,000 projects. So you don't always get whatever the maximum is. It's based on what you're doing. What is the list of approved projects that you're going to do with your grant? Is it roofing? Is it siding? Is it paint? Is it sprinklers? What is it windows? Is it doors? Is it both? So there will be a developed list by the applicant, perhaps with the help of staff, depending on what they're asking for and what can qualify. But at the end of the day, there'll have to be an agreed upon list of what it is that this particular grant is supposed to be spent on, with some idea of what those things are going to cost. And that's where the contractor can help, so that the grant amount is somewhat equal to what the fix-ups will be. And so that's what this document accomplishes. And there will be either more or less grant requirements, as we've discussed, based on your preference. So this is sort of a standard deal. Every recipient would sign off on it. And if you get down here to the end, it says the signature is of the grant recipient, and it's the chair of the CRA. And then the various exhibits are relevant because they tell you what you're looking at. The description of the project, as we said, what is it you're going to do with the money, including application, project estimate, estimated reimbursement. Then B is this description of the property on which this money is going to be spent on, not some other property. And Exhibit C are the grant requirements. And then there's Exhibit D, this was a placeholder, and we're now going to go to Exhibit D. Exhibit D is the document I mentioned about getting the contractor to sign off on payment. So let's see if I can get this up to page width. Okay. So Exhibit D is what we call progress schedule and payment application procedures. They govern the payment process for improvements funded in part or whole by the Apopka Community Redevelopment Agency. Now, let me talk about this in whole or in part. We will fund what we approve. But as sometimes happens, you've experienced this in your own life, the contractor gets there and you say, well, while they're here, I'd like to get this thing done or that thing done. Okay, but that's not on the grant, okay? And they would pay, those things would have to be paid for them by themselves outside of the grant. And critically important to this success, at least so the CRA is not dragged into the middle of a dispute, is the contractor would still have to agree that they will give us a release for payment for all of the grant approved projects. If they then get in a dispute over, well, while we were there, the guy asked us to fix AC and he owes us another $5,000. We don't care about that. We care about the release for the money we gave you. So if there's a lien on the property by you because of a dispute with them, we're not a part of that lien. You all follow that?
Uh,
So that's a part of this document.
This when was this added? Because I don't have this on mine.
No, it's blank.
So we didn't have a
I
chance
was
to
He
review
sent
it.
you sent this today.
No, I did send it out. In fact, I blind copied you all on it.
Oh,
But
yesterday.
it apparently did not make it to the packet.
Okay.
And so, and I do not know why, but you all got it.
Oh, we got it?
You got it?
Okay.
Well, you know, you're right. You might not have because I don't have the non-council member, CRA members address, and I thought it would be in the packet, but that's my mistake. I don't know the magic between what I send and what gets in the packet, so I apologize for that.
So I guess, Mr. Williams, what's the
Oh, here it
process for
is.
us to get this?
It's in the email.
Because we've had this before where our attorneys sent us stuff, just not by the deadline, but you sent us updated amendments or exhibits, but it's not been in the packets or it's not been to our other members. Can we create a process that this is equitably sent out to everybody? Because it wasn't in, especially if we can get it uploaded to the website as well.
Yeah, I can work with Sue with the city clerk to see what process we need to go through to do it. It'd be an updated packet, I believe, at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we definitely need to make sure that city attorney has the emails of all the members on the CRA.
That I
So I'll
apologize.
clarify
I
on
didn't
that.
Okay. Yeah, because this has happened a few times, and I just want to make sure that everyone has all the information all at the same time.
Right.
So we can make the right decisions.
So again, we've covered a lot of this in the prior stuff, so I don't want to belabor it, particularly since we're already in the regular meeting time. But these are the things, whether we pick them through our RFQ process or an applicant comes to us and says, this is the contractor I want to use, the grant recipient and the contractor will sign off on this document that makes it clear that the payment is coming from the CRA upon the meeting of the standards that are requirement. And here's the schedule I mentioned. First progress payment when at least 30% of approved work has been completed. Second progress payment may be requested when 60% of the work is complete. Third progress payment when 90% of the work is complete. The CRA withholds 10% of the amount due for each progress payment. So whatever, if the progress payment was 10,000 and at 30%, then you would hold back 10% of that payment, so $1,000. And the next one would be and so forth. So as you go through, by the end, you have the final 10% plus what you held back for the first payments. And so that makes it, the reason for that is important is because otherwise, using a $10,000 grant for a number, 30% roughly would be $3,000, a little bit over. 60% would be another $3,000. 90% would be another $3,000. You only owe have roughly $1,000 left. Not necessarily a lot of incentive for someone to continue on the road and not walk off. But if you have $1,000 plus money from those others that was held back, that's why you do retainage. That's in case you don't know how retainage works or why that's important. So that's how that works.
My one concern on this, or with this specific section, is that there's going to be a payment needed for materials, whether it's siding, windows, things of that nature. That's a big cost somebody's fronting. The contractor, are we expecting them to front that and then also wait until they actually do 30% of the work, or because it's going to limit the amount of contractors that are wanting to front $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, and then the rest is going to be labor. So I understand that part, but the material side,
it's a legitimate concern. But the problem is, I don't have a solution for it, because if you say no, that we will pay the cost of materials, that still doesn't guarantee us at any level of completion the work gets done, or that the materials are purchased, delivered to the site, and not incorporated in the job. So I can write it however you want it. How I wrote it is for maximum protection of the public dollars here. But if you want to say, we'll give you a first draw of up to X percent of the total amount for materials, that's a policy question. But again, I draft it where it's the most conservative. I think the bigger problem you're going to have is not having enough people that are willing to do jobs that are at this level. I think that's going to be the bigger issue, because because this is exactly your point. If I'm doing a job that's $30,000 or less, then I may not have the money to advance the cost of materials. But if I'm doing a job that's $30,000 or less, you're not going to see big contractors come and say, I can't wait to get these jobs, even though they could afford to front the materials cost until they went through the draw process. So it's not an easily solvable problem. I'll write it however you want it, but that's why it's written the way it is now. Okay. So in the application for payment, the request payment, the contractor or the grant recipient on the contractor's behalf must submit an application for payment. We've talked about that. And then these are the various steps that they have to follow. I'll cut to the chase regarding the withholding. We've already talked about retainage, and then the contractor signs off, the grant recipient signs off, and the CRA signs off. So everybody knows up front what the expectations are. And if we are using pre-bid contractors that we go out through the RFQ process and qualify, a part of our package and getting them qualified would be that this is a requirement to sign this document. This is the payment schedule you will have to agree to. And if a homeowner or a property owner selects you, this is the deal to get access to these funds. So all of these things can be modified to your liking. But as you can tell now, as I've explained sort of the overview, it's to provide maximum protection for the public dollars here. And we can do anything less than that you choose. So those are the three documents. Now, the next most important question is what other documents need to be done to get this program in order? The first is an application. These are no particular order of importance, but obviously the application is where you get the name of the property owner, the address of the property owner, preliminary description of what they think they want, how much money they're looking for, what they think the project would be for, roofing, siding, whatever, and whatever else we decide makes good sense for y'all to judge it. And it will be more if, for example, you say there's going to be an income cutoff, and it'll be less if you say all you got to do is prove ownership of the property for which a grant is being sought, ownership or a long-term lease or something that satisfies whatever you guys want before you invest public dollars in it. The second thing is these guidelines. And again, they can be as detailed, and some of them are incredibly detailed, or as not detailed as you like. Detailed would be things like how much income is too much income, or does it matter? Guidelines could be specifically all the things we talked about here as recommendations, they become carved in stone. These are eligible expenses. These are not eligible expenses. So there's some decision making there in that process, and on and on. But at the end, what you have is a document so that whoever is reviewing the application, whether that's Bradley, his designee, a new CRA director, whoever it is, says, okay, I see your application, you qualify. Or I see your application, you're lacking some information we need to know whether you qualify. Proof of ownership, for example, and so on. So that's what the guidelines would be. You already now have sort of an overview of the program, which we went through first, and you have a contract, if you will, an award agreement to go to the grant recipient once they've been chosen and signed off on, and you have the payment agreement, which the contractors, whichever they come privately or from your pre-vetting, that they sign off on in terms of how they get paid. Those are the documents that you need, and obviously the last one has nothing to do with documentation, but you need a funding and accounting process for the money. But those are it, and that's kind of the overview of how a program like this works.
All right, questions?
Wow,
Yeah,
that was a lot
it's a-
to,
yeah, it's a-
kind of process.
It's not as simple as just giving away money.
No, because I'm kind of what commission call. How do they refer to us up here?
Member.
Member. Okay. Lester said is when a contract is hired $30,000 in that $30,000 he's sort of including his labor costs. So when you're doing windows or you're doing a major
Right.
renovation, he's kind of figuring out what his cost is going to be. So if he has to order the supply and he's not going to front the money, how is that going to work? I mean,
Well, for that particular contractor, it wouldn't work. The only other way it could work is if the homeowner had the ability to front the cost of the materials at whatever number that would be until the payment is. Because again, the money can only be used a certain way, and you can disperse payments however you want. So if you said the maximum, let's say you said the maximum grant, and I don't know whether y'all settled on this, but I heard 20, I've heard 10, and I've heard 30. So I'm going to just use 30 because I can do the math easy. So let's suppose that the number is 30. So, all right, so the number is 30, and we're going to just make an arbitrary and say we will advance, once the contractor signs on the document, $5,000 for initial materials. And all they need to do is they need to go get the materials and bring us a receipt. We don't give them the money to go buy the materials. They buy the materials. We give them the money so they can, make their credit or do whatever they got to do correctly. But at least with a receipt, we know they bought the materials and we have a record of it. If we just gave them the money, we never know if we'll see them again. And so that's about the best you can do. Is it perfect? No. But to answer your question, with these amounts, which are significant to a lot of people, and I get that, but nevertheless, for the contract world, particularly when the market's hot, this is not a big amount of money. And so it's going to be hard finding people.
So we are administering other funds to other contractors. Do we require them to upfront?
That I don't know, because again, I don't know anything about how you do
Rattler,
your
do
other
you know?
grants.
Do we require payment upfront?
No, there's always a draw schedule.
Draw schedule.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
So why are we?
What's the point of
what's
the commercial, like, or how do we do the commercial side of this?
It's a similar process, but I would presume, but maybe incorrectly, that on the commercial side, you definitely have like a matching issue, because on commercial grants, it's very typical to have
Well,
a
the
match
commercial's
as
a
opposed to 100%. We do everything. It's also very true on both sides that you do them as reimbursements, not upfront advances. And it's very true on the commercial side that you're really focused on what is the presentation from the street for the business area that the business is in, this commercial thing. Because again, the idea is if people don't feel safe coming into the business district, they're probably not going to patronize the business. So what they're doing, the external improvements, does it make the place look more inviting? And I didn't write the statute. I get that there's a lot of things that can be done internal to a business that are important for safety and other things. And I have opined until the legislature tells me different. And as you know, we are always on the cutting edge with these guys. But I've opined that certain kinds of interior improvements, even in a commercial setting, if they are remedying code violations, an example, cloth wiring in older buildings that is a fire hazard, or widening of doorways in a commercial building so they can accommodate wheelchairs, I could at least make a good argument that expenditure of funds in a commercial grant context makes sense. But it really is about.
Do we have a similar agreement to this one for commercial?
No, we don't. No.
Bobby, why don't you talk about the payment for? I think everything is after the fact.
So I think it was in regards to, because I understand the commercial side of it, for the community development block grant. Do we require the contractor? Do we award any money before any work is done?
Bobby, you want to answer?
I think she was asking about CDBG.
Yes. Do we require the contractor to do the work first and then we reimburse them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do we have any program where we advance funds at all? Is there any time where we actually advance any funds?
And Bobby, talk about the CRA.
Yeah, so for the commercial programs, we don't advance funds. You have to turn in 3 bids,
Yeah.
and then once the work is completed, the applicant puts up 25%. Once the work is completed, then they get their reimbursement, their 75% portion of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Blanche.
Blanche Sherman, Finance Directors. I'm not aware of any programs where we advance funds.
Okay.
I mean, typically that's not a standard procedure for governments to prepay or advance other than rent.
Okay. You said other than a grant?
Rent.
Rent. Oh, rent. Okay. Rent. Okay. So what is there a solution to this, attorney?
If you're talking about a solution to materials and how to get started, I can check and see if other programs have one. But I did. I mean, a lot of the stuff we used, I looked at Tampa, I looked at Fort Myers, I looked at other cities that I represent on their CRAs and their own programs. And they all have matches. It's not so in the match would be the part where the homeowner then, if that match gets some materials, that's what gets them. So this would be unique amongst my clients. It's probably not unique in the state because there's no match. But if you have a match, you have your answer to your question.
But don't most contractors have some type of credit at I don't know, Home Depot or something? So
right, and that's what I was
if
suggesting.
they're a legitimate contractor that we would want to do the work, they should be able to go to Home Depot or wherever they go and get $5,000 worth of supplies and then get reimbursed.
Yeah, and then bring us a receipt.
If they don't have that
them.
wherewithal, then we probably don't want them doing the work. And neither do the residents, because that puts everybody in a precarious position.
And that's the best solution that I can come up with. Yeah. And I think it would be true for the people that would apply to this program. I just hope there would be enough of them to make it worth our while to go through an RFQ process. Because again, we'll just have to see, see what you get when you put it out there. And I think individual homeowners are going to have the same issue, because it's not just Well, will I do a $30,000 job? Sure, but wait a minute, I got to do a $30,000 job. I got to buy all the materials in advance, and then I got to do 30, 60, 90 when I got somebody who wants to be paid next week. Those are things I can't tell you, but they're market forces. So it depends. If the market is lean and they're looking for work, you'll absolutely get them. But if they have a lot of other options, it's going to be hard.
But it's also a good opportunity if you have somebody just starting out.
Correct.
So it's a good opportunity to support those businesses as well.
Correct.
So there may be larger contractors that they may turn down these jobs, but it may be people in the community who are contractors that will look forward to having these jobs.
Right.
So,
But just a small note to that: if they're newer, they
They don't
probably
have
don't have large credit lines, and if they do have a credit line,
They-
they're paying 18, 20% month over month, depending on how long it takes them to get the work done, how long it takes to get the custom windows ordered, and things of that nature that they have to prepay for. So now they're paying interest and losing profit margins. So I hear what you're saying as well, but it's a weird dichotomy to be at that $30,000 level or any level
Yeah.
really to have a contractor front all of this without any money out of pocket up
the
front.
the plus side is most of these are shorter term projects
Right.
and lower cost projects. So it's not like they're coming out of $70,000 of materials and then they have to wait 18 months to get reimbursed. Generally, they're gonna probably, if it's 30,000, let's just say 5,000 is materials. That's something that's more doable. Or maybe you buy a certain portion of those materials, then you get reimbursed for that. Then you move to the next, because in all instances you don't need all of the materials for the job on day one.
Well, let me walk you through a scenario. If I need to get new windows done on a wood frame house that has siding, I can't just order the windows or order the siding. All of that has to be ordered at once. All of it has to be removed at once, and all of it has to be installed at once to get proper seals and installations. And most of those windows have to be custom ordered. They're not just off the rack windows. Most windows have to be custom ordered. So that creates a problem that I have to order that out. Again, that whoever's ordering it has to front that cash in some capacity, whether it's a deposit or the full amount or 50% of the windows. And then from there, the siding goes on, windows go in, siding goes on, everything's sealed. So it is kind of, depending on the project, it can be.
But that's probably going to cost you more than 30 grand.
It depends. If
Yeah.
they're front facing windows and
I'd be surprised if that didn't almost eat up the 30 grand if you get all new siding and windows.
well, that's the point though.
Yeah, that's what we capped the program at 30 grand, right? And so if you cap the program at 30 grand, then you're only, unless somebody has additional funds, we're already limiting them to certain things that they can do, right? So if you're capped at 30 grand, you may have to decide between windows and siding just because of where the program is set. So I think it's beneficial either way. And unfortunately, I don't know if there's a way to account for if somebody doesn't have this or that. Not to sound, take a hard line on it, but I almost feel like, particularly with all the stories of contractors taking advantage of elderly folks and other people, if they're in a position where they can't come up with a couple of grand for supplies, to me that questions the validity of that contractor. So that's my opinion. But I also think it's a safe opinion, and it also helps
Yes.
protect the residents.
I agree.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'll try and take these in order. As far as who should do the work, we'll start there. In my experience, given the documents that I've read here, the agreement and all the other stuff, and having managed 5 CRAs, I'm willing to bet residents are not going to step up to the plate and ask for this grant program. The fastest way to get it done is for the city to provide the contractors. Now, my understanding at the last meeting we were in, that the city had some general contractors on a continuing service contract. Is that true or not?
Is it full?
We do have some general contractors on contract for city properties. We would have to put this back out to bid for a CRA program.
Yeah, but okay. Well, the bid thing is what's confusing. So let's say you have to go to an RFQ. So the RFQ, one of the provisions should be the contractor is responsible for the upfront cost of supplies and materials. you get reimbursed on a draw. Second, it's a $600,000 project. That's the budget, 600,000. It's not 30. It's 30 per house. But from a contractor standpoint, he or she would say, oh, I have a potential of making $600,000. Now that's a bigger number. Now, and the reason why I'm a fan of getting the work done quicker is because it takes pressure off the residents relative to having to go out and get solicit bids. What does that mean? Select from pre-approved contractors. What does that mean? If the city has pre-approved contractors based on a request for qualifications, the city gets to pick the contractors relative to the work that needs to be done. The city pays the contractor on a draw basis. The work gets done faster. Now, if a house only costs $20,000, the fund has $10,000 in reserves that can be used someplace else if the house happens to be $35,000, as long as it doesn't exceed the $60,000. But the resident also has the ability to come back the following fiscal year and ask for another grant program to finish whatever work wasn't finished this fiscal year. So it's not the end of it, per se. Now, as far as the contract is concerned, the agreement. So I read through this. One thing that needs to be added to the agreement is that whatever work is completed, whatever option the board picks, whether it's option 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, that those improvements run with the property. And if they sell the property, nobody can come back and redo the property relative to the improvements that have already been made. And there's a certain time frame in which it has to stay improved. If they want to make other improvements, they have to come back to the CRA or city and ask for those improvements, and you say yes or no. Why spend all that money? As Member Anderson said, they sell the house on an investment scheme. Somebody comes in and says, well, I don't like the color. I want it pink and blue. No can do. We painted it beige and brown. It stays that way for a certain number of years. So that takes that incentive away. Number 2 is, and I've already said this to the city attorney, I know the agreement he crafted was legally sufficient. I'm not arguing that point. But there's provisions in the agreement that basically says to the recipient, residents, you people out there in the audience, that you have to maintain records. If your records are stored electronically, they must be provided to the CRA upon request and in the format compatible with the city's technology system. Now that's a stretch. There could be some residents that don't have computers. So how do they electronically store it? Most of them like paper. So they have to present the paper to the city. But if it's the contractor that belongs to the city, that gets taken away from the residents. They're not responsible for that. The city is, and the contractor. So I know we've dealt into the weeds, but I think that from a policy standpoint, I think what we need to decide, Mr. Chair, is how the improvements are made to the residents. Is it option 1, option 2, or my option, which is the city provides it? And then once that's determined, and that option is determined relative to who has to upfront the money, the rest of it falls into line, especially if you do an RFQ. That's part of the requirements. Either you accept the requirements as a contractor or you don't. It's a free country. You don't have to. But if some smaller contractors can upfront the money and know there's $600,000 to be made, they're going to step up to the plate and they're going to sign on the dotted line. Now, I can assure you from my experience, the work will go faster, smoother, and the residents will be very pleased.
Member Smith, you've been awfully quiet. Any?
Well, at first I was kind of perplexed with the part about a deposit because in most instances most contractors would want a deposit before they begin to work. Uh, you want me to come and do a job, but you're not going to give me anything to get started. And so at first I thought about at least a 10% deposit of whatever the cost of the project was. But then I understand that government agencies don't advance money, so I guess that's out of the question. Uh, and then I really couldn't understand how one contractor would do all of these jobs and get the $600,000 and be able to complete it in a timely manner.
Well,
If we're talking about 20 different residents or more.
well, a good general contractor would probably have subs, a couple of painters, a couple of guys that can do windows, a couple of guys can do. A general contractor is a coordinator. He doesn't necessarily does the work. It's no different than when a general contractor builds a house. He doesn't put in the air conditioning system. He doesn't put in the windows. He doesn't paint. He doesn't do the flooring. He has subs that do it. So envision a general contractor being retained by the city. He's going to get subs, and he's responsible for the quality of work relative to the subs performing the work. He's responsible for it, not the city. And if it doesn't perform to the city standards and inspections, he doesn't get paid. So he goes back to the subs and says, you're not getting paid. That's the way the system works. So we have to take advantage of how the system works to the residents' benefits.
Okay, but I think we need to hurry and do something, or October's going to be here and we're still going to be in the planning stage.
Well, can I address that one thing? And it may be a good time to clear up any misconceptions. So I think you all know, and I tried to explain last time, that we don't have the sword of Damocles of October 1st over our head anymore. That doesn't mean it won't come back. So we definitely should move forward. But if what we're doing has to go into or ends up going into the next budget season, that's not make or break in terms of legally where we are. But next January, when the legislature comes back in session, then we could be back under it. You just don't know. So we have a little bit of a reprieve if we need it. But I am definitely encouraging you to keep on going. But these are issues that have to be vetted.
Well, we do and we don't. I mean, there's the legislature, but there's also the funding the county has required us to spend. So we have a separate obligation.
I got you.
By the county, which is we have to have it obligated by.
They want us to expend so
Right.
much per year.
Per year.
In that 3-year period, I think it's 50%, Bobby. Mm-hmm.
Right.
50%. So we do need to expend some funds, and the skate pump saved us last year. We were very close to that 50%, and I think are we doing something on the trail that's going to help us out this year?
Okay.
Yeah. Because it's 50% of the funding, the
The
property tax funding.
the,
Yeah.
the balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't, property owners to start coming in and want to present projects, and we don't have anything in place yet.
So we need to move forward.
So I'd like to see us move this along.
I'm ready to go.
Can I ask the attorney a question, Mr. Chair? It was stated by the interim city administrator that the city has contractors that can do work on city property. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. So if the city were to do the work on these houses, Mr. Attorney, one of the recommendations I made in my model was that the residents would have to grant the city a construction easement.
Right.
Now that construction easement belongs to the city. So without taking the rubber band and stretching it too far, would that be considered city property?
No.
Okay.
Just did this with the CDBG affordable housing program.
Right. Just because they gave it an easement, it doesn't make it city property. And the easement would have to extend to the contractor because the contractor's going to be doing the work. The city's going to be doing inspections. It has an automatic right to inspect all construction anyway, with or without an easement. So, but what you're talking about, a temporary construction easement, would be part of it. But that would also be the case. See, even under the model where the city says, here's our program, we have the contractor or contractors that we will have do the work. These are the kinds of things that they can do. You still have to come in and apply, because otherwise we just don't show up and knock on the door. Hey, we're here to do your roof today, or we're here to do your painting today. So they have to come in and ask to be served in this way, and then go through at least some level of process, which would include them signing up on the rights of us to go there with our contract and so forth. But there are other aspects to it, because if it's our contractor under contract with us, and the grant recipient simply is saying, I agree to receive these services and and these specific things pursuant to an approved set of plans that they would have to approve, because again, it's their dwelling or property of whatever it is to them, whether it's a rental or whatever it is. They, all of that has to be a part of it some way. It's not like we just show up and knock on your door like Girl Scout cookies. You want cookies today? It doesn't work that way. And so, whatever that process is, would involve necessarily them signing off on the documents we're talking about: access for construction purposes, the agreement that the contractor would be, this contractor was authorized to do this work. This would be the scope of work that they agree to on their property, and the timeline to get it done from start to finish. Anything that we would need, if it's ours, in terms of cooperation regarding, cars out of the driveways, the exterior porches cleaned off of toys and other things that would get in the way of the work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these things have a lot of detail to them. If you just think about when a contractor does work at your house, today I had a guy doing drywall. I had to empty the garage of the cars and so forth. I had to make sure that windows were open because of fumes and a whole bunch of other stuff. Those are details that don't happen until the project gets going, and they tell you, okay, this is what we need. And if you're going to try to anticipate them in advance, that would be a part of what the homeowner or the property owner has to agree to, and say, if you take our money, this is what you have to allow it to happen for us to be able to deliver the product we're telling you we will deliver. But all of this can be done. It's just not as simple as showing up and saying, hey, we're ready to fix your house. They got to apply. They got to agree to what it is they want versus what we might want for them. And, that's all a part of the process.
And Mr. Howe, the application that the residents filled out now for the facade grant, can that application be modified for this program and exclude the percentage that they have to give? Can that be modified for this program?
100%. Yeah, if y'all didn't have one, I'd pull from somewhere else and modify it to fit whatever y'all tell me you want in it, in terms of qualifications, no qualifications, matching, not matching, those kinds of things.
Okay.
Can we just go through if there's things we need to? I'd like to take as what he's offered here, and if there's minor modifications, I'd like to just put this thing to bed.
Well, not everyone's seen and read all the documents, and I don't want to make and start kind of negotiating on the fly up here. Let's get some more feedback from the residents. I think the draw schedule is really important and something that I think is going to be a make or break to this program, and we need it to be successful for the residents. So what I would say is let's have a CRA meeting at the beginning of our following council meeting, and because again, not everyone's reviewed all the exhibits, so I want to make sure everyone has reviewed them, comfortable with them. We get additional public feedback, and then make decisions from there versus just trying to redline stuff tonight on the fly.
And I can get you by then the application, a draft set of guidelines. I don't know exactly what you all want, but I've listened enough that I think I know some of the things you don't want to see. It doesn't appear like anybody's too keen on having any match, so that won't be there unless y'all change your minds. But it's going to be to some degree like when I tried to get a consensus of where you wanted to go in the charter, and said, okay, I think I know what they want. Then I'll put it together, and y'all tell me whether you like it or don't. But then you would have the benefit of all of what I believe to be the necessary documents. And so you could see from soup to nuts, here's what you happen to do when you come in. Here's the guidelines that you're going to agree to. Here are the kinds of projects that you're eligible for. Here's the amount of money, which again, I've heard 3 different numbers. So whatever that comes out to be, but again, I can leave a blank and y'all can fill that one out. We can put in a blank for, and you can decide at the time, we are willing to, upon a receipt, allow X amount of the approved grant. So if it's a $20,000 grant, maybe the approved amount up front is 5,000. If it's a $30,000 grant, maybe it's 7,000 for materials or some other number. I can just have a blank that allows them to, with upon receipt, that the materials are there and proof of delivery to the location where they're supposed to be. So somebody can go back and say, yep, I see siding, I see paint, I see brick or whatever it is. It's there, verified. Then I can, so your carry time, if you will, on supplies you've gotten to start the job is very short. If you're diligent about getting us a receipt and showing us that the stuff is on the job, we can be diligent about writing a check. So all of those things are things I got enough of an idea of what's going on, I think, to come up with at least documents that you could work off of. But you may need more than, as we've already proven, the first 30 minutes before a meeting, because we've been at this now an hour and a half.
Agreed. Let's add a little more time to it to really get through it.
Is
Mr.
it
Chair.
possible to do this? Like, I'm okay with the format, but I have a lot of questions on a lot of details. And just for me to ask the questions would be
Sure.
30 minutes. And I don't think this is the
as-
appropriate
as-
forum to do it, to hold everybody up. So I don't know, is it better to have a workshop type on this and then actually go through it? Because, like I said, the general framework is here, but there are details in the agreement. I think there are details in the guidelines that are missing that we would all have to agree on to generally to make it the program that it's intended to be. So not sure the best way to do it, but 30 minutes before a meeting isn't gonna help. The 2 or 3 hours sitting here like this isn't gonna help. Next time we really need to be able to, get our hands dirty and get into this and give you the information that we need, and then also go through the document itself. Because there's some things in here, a couple of things for me, seem inconsistent with what we're saying in other places in the document. So outside of the policy, I think it's just making sure we all understand the document and we're all comfortable with it and application of guidelines and everything else that goes with it.
My suggestion, which applies not only to CRA meetings but all meetings, is if there's an issue coming up on an agenda like this one, and you have questions in advance, there's no reason to have to wait till we're in a public setting to ask them. Because as the vice mayor will attest, if I get an email, I respond, and per council policy, I copy everybody else blind.
Well, remember, you don't have my email. I don't have yours.
I'm going to have that now. And so what I was going to suggest is I would do the same thing. So if anybody says, hey, I was reading this, what does this mean? My answer to them would also be spin out to everybody else, because that's the policy that the council has adopted.
And it's not so much that I didn't understand what it meant. It's just that there are a couple of places where it indeed does conflict. So there are definitions, defined terms, capitalized terms that aren't defined. So there are things like that need to be worked through. So happy to, send a red line to you if that's the way to do it.
No problem.
But then there's also the policy piece of it as well that I think everybody needs to sit down and understand.
And some of those defined terms, I know exactly what you're talking about, would be in the adopted guidelines and carried over, but we don't have a set yet.
Well, there are a couple others, but I got you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I guess in order to facilitate the CRA attorney's work, I think if we can come to a consensus on the option that the board prefers, and from there, between the CRA attorney and the staff, they could put in the criteria. Now, one of the criteria, even though this is the board is funded by the county and the city, I think it's the board's responsibility to follow the city's purchasing policy and any other financial policies that's associated with paying contractors. If we start to deviate from that and we don't have the authority to do it, in my opinion, then you run your risk of setting precedent for something else in the future. So if we can come to a consensus on the option, and my preference would be the city provides the contractor, the residents pay nothing into the grant program, all the work is done by the city contractor, and then from there, then the staff and the attorney can say, here's how they get paid, here's how they do this, here's how they do that.
And if we use the city contract, we got to do an RFP, correct?
Well,
Because we can't just-
In addition to that, I just think that we should allow the homeowners to choose their contractors. I don't think we should decide and say this is the one contractor, use this contractor. I just think we definitely should allow them to choose their contractors.
I
Give them options. Some may, yeah, just give them options. Mm-hmm.
what do you mean?
Either
They may not want to use the city contract.
and right, yes. And right now we have the
Okay.
we currently
Yes,
have the
absolutely.
option. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what we kind of have now is options. I think we should keep it as the two options.
Yeah.
And that's what was the before we discussed having the options.
All right. So let's bring up public comment, and let's try to get through the CRA meeting and then move on. But what I would say is, why don't we'll set it up maybe for after the next council meeting. We need to be a little flexible for the members that aren't on the council. But if you've got any ideas on when or that thoughts on changes that you see, or I guess Cliff, if you could get that out sooner rather than later on those the three pieces to that.
Yeah, I'm going to be out and about here in the next 4 or 5 weeks, but I have people who will be
Yeah.
able to put together. I mean, basically, what's left is the guidelines,
Yeah.
the application, and a specific
So-
pay application.
Okay, so I mean, if we could get that, like first of next week or something, so give everybody a week or so to at least look at, and then they can redline, as Member Williams said, that we've all got, and then
See, June
So I don't
4th
think that's
is
gonna work
not
because she's
good
not available.
because
She's not available.
I've already announced that I'm
Oh,
not going
okay.
to be available.
So it have to be the
June
follow up.
okay,
council meeting.
so do it.
Well, can we? I mean, if you can do it the week before, I don't have a problem. But June 4th,
That'd be next
I
week then
can't-
if we do
I
the week.
can't.
Yeah, we know.
That'd be 18.
yeah.
So let's bring up the public first, and then we'll figure that out.
Leroy Bell, Mars Heller. On the contractors, you already said that let the residents pick their own contractors. Each resident, if you had two with a house need to be redid right beside each other. One might want to use a contractor, the contractor come in and make a bid and say, well, we do this for $15,000. The next house could be $10,000. But once the contractor is picked through the selection, the resident sign, the CRA sign, and the contractor sign, and come to agreement that now you got an estimate of $15,000. I know most people, most business like mechanic shops. If you go to a mechanic shop and you need a radiator, the mechanic shop got a relationship with most of the pod stores. He calls up and say, I need a radiator for a 64 Ford. He sent it down. Once the job done, the contractor pays the auto store. So what I'm saying, once the contractor receives a signed contract with the city and along with the resident, that's his ticket right there that he could go down to Lowe's or he could go down to Home Depot. They see that he has secured this contract. And in this contract is $15,000 coming out. And he know an estimate of what materials that he used. And so he can draw those materials from Lowe's. And once he fixed the building, the city still have control because of the pay schedule that the attorney just said. Everything has to be, all I's have to be dotted, all T's have to be crossed, 10, 30, up to 90, and they can get paid. It's just that simple. And to Sylvester Hall point, it wasn't nothing. You had a resident to come to the city and speak to the CRA. And it was told to Commissioner Anderson's point, at the last CRA meeting, she brought up it shouldn't be any place where the resident have to pay into this grant. It should be,
We haven't approved the grant.
I know, but I'm just saying, it shouldn't be no out-of-pocket money to the resident, but it was told to this one particular resident in the back, you had to pay a percentage if you was a commercial, and you had to pay a percentage if you was a resident.
Sounds like
And
you
that's
were
what the point was.
I think because it wasn't, we haven't updated, approved this new program yet. So that was the old program. Is probably what they was referring to because we haven't adopted a new program yet. So I think that's probably what happened.
Albert McKimmey, 3603 Golden Gem Road. The attorney did a sterling job in buttoning up the finances to make sure everything was going to be safe. But unfortunately, in real life, as a contractor with experience of what happens in building houses or repairing houses, I wouldn't look at your contracts the way it stands just now. Why? Because 30,000 is not a lot of money. It really doesn't do very much for a GC. GC's got so much expenditure in running this business. He has to do numerous jobs to make it worth his while. Small jobs don't pay the bills. First of all, typically you could expect to spend 30%, between 20 and 30% of a job's value on materials. So if the job's 30,000, let's just say it's 30%, you've got £10,000 or $10,000 of a layout before you even begin. Then, as a contractor, the thing that I used to hate was retention. And we're speaking about retention at 10%, retention at 30%, retention at 60%, retention at 90%. By the time you add up all the retention, by the time you add up all the money the contractor's got to lay out, how much money is he actually going to make when he has his deductions for his staff and things like that? The more hurdles you place on this, the less likely it is to be successful for the residents. I think we've got to look at this and say, yeah, we understand that when materials come on site, the first thing that I would ask you is how often are materials stolen from site just now? If you deliver materials to site, unless you know who it belongs to and who's going to take responsibility for, if that material goes missing, the job's never even going to get started. So there's a lot of things we have to detail. But the more detail we put in this, the less likely you are to get contractors that are willing to do this. And I think it's a great idea for the city to hire a GC to oversee what's happening here. Because you already have problems with inspections and managing to maintain staff to carry out inspections. We should look at all possibilities and maybe have someone to oversee on a consultative basis this.
I have a concern
Name and
for
address for the
some
record, please.
Dr. O of Apopka. I have a concern for some of the residents, especially we know that a lot in this area are not only low income but low education. And I don't think their mortgages are 16 pages long like that contract is and the detail in it. I think we need to look at making it readable, legible, and understandable to someone. And I agree that we need to make fewer hurdles. I don't think that Blanche wants to has to go through so many payments out and having to write that many checks. We know that just processing one check, what do they say now? It was $25 in 1990 to process one check. And I imagine with the pay scale of employees, it might end up being closer to $60 to process a check nowadays. So you put four checks to do one $20,000 job, and we're looking at costing more to process the checks than it is to get the job done. So there are some issues there, and the fact that what contractor is going to want to go through that 16-page contract and all those payments and holdbacks and everything. So maybe we can lighten the load a little bit with this process. The other thing is I'm concerned about how little the citizens and the commercial industry is getting out of this CRA. To me, this looks like a slush fund to take care of city property. I'm seeing that most of the money, millions, is going towards the city. And this is supposed to be money from the citizens to take care of the citizens. And I'm seeing a slush fund of taking care of recreational property. And it's supposed to be making the city look better, not making recreational parks. And we need to be taking care of the main thoroughfares and taking care of the houses in the CRA and not making better parks. We have a budget for that, and we don't need to be robbing the CRA to make better basketball courts and making prettier parks, period. And so I'm really embarrassed to have to get up here and say you have a slush fund and you're robbing the citizens of their CRA money. Thank you.
Rogers back at 7 West Main Street. Two things I was kind of think about as we guys kind of talk. It seems like it's concern on jobs getting done. It's concern about building materials and things as such. Is it possible that the city confront the building materials from a standpoint? Do you have an agreement or a contract with Lowe's or Home Depot? You guys pay it. That way, the contractor doesn't have to absorb that cost, or the homeowner doesn't have to put out that money. I just see that as a possible option. And then secondly, my other question is, when was the last time the community redevelopment plan was updated? Because I know from online, it says 2017, but it hasn't been anything I saw since then, which leads to the other question is, the things that have been proposed, does it actually meet the goals and objectives of the plan? Which there again, like Dr. O said, the citizens are paying the money to upgrade city property. And that's just my thing is, if the citizens are paying the money, why is the money not benefiting them as well as the businesses? I know as a property owner that's in the CRA, you get exemption, but me as a commercial owner, I don't get exemption. So my property taxes go up considerably more than, let's say, a homeowner. But there again, it seems like in a certain sense, the businesses get picked on in favor of the residents, but there again, those are the entities that's paying to it. So I think it should look at how do we benefit the ones that's paying into it, as well as ancillary things that help impact the area. Thank you.
Clinton Stanley, 2002 Larkwood Drive. As I hear her say, upgrading parks and recreations. Okay, if you that they are citizens that of Apopka that really needs a better facility, recreation facility, need access to bathrooms at Williams Park, upgrade of Williams Park. If you're going to use CRA money, can you for the CRA area? If I'm not mistaken, Williams Park sits in the CRA district. Can you upgrade that and make it larger for recreational use and also give more access to the restrooms there? Because they are citizens of Apopka. When she said those are citizens, so if you're going to benefit the citizens, I'm speaking for the youth. Can you upgrade and make it a larger recreational complex on this side of town? Is that any kind of possible way that you can upgrade that park? Because I've heard Sylvester talking about it forever, making electric, giving water. Can we upgrade the parks in the city of Apopka that's in the CRA district? Because it's a well overdue need for a greater and a bigger recreational complex like we have in the, up north. And so I even invited my team. They outside. They just been waiting on the city council meeting because we're going to make a push that the city needs to go ahead and push the envelope and get a recreational facility that's can accommodate the community of South Apopka.
Sylvester Sylvester Hall, 3091 Rolling Hills Lane. When we get to the, to the percentage of work that has been done, whether it's 25%, 30%, what are going to be the identified instructions for that? How we going about putting it so it's across the board? So when we say at 30%, what constitutes 30%? What constitutes 60%? Based on what project? These things we need to be make sure that we have that completely written out. And also, who is the CRA director? Who is the CRA committee? So we're going through this whole shebang and we're not even set up properly. And this is not something that just happened yesterday. This has been going on for years. And we at this point, and we still don't have a CRA director. We still don't have a CRA committee. Go figure.
Anybody else? All right, we'll close the public hearing. So I guess we're looking to. I guess direction is that Cliff Shepard's going to get us something here in the next week or so that we can all take a look at. Feel free to redline it, get your comments back to him. I mean, if hopefully whatever comments we all make kind of gel. If they don't, then we'll have conflicting changes in whatever your document is, Cliff, and we'll go from there. That again, we're good. And then one last item. What is the last one? Resolution 2025-01. Bobby. Well, we're going to take a break, like a 5-minute break, and we'll come right back to the city council meeting.
The last one is the resolution to, okay,
right.
pay back.
Yeah. Resolution 2025-01 proposes repayment of signs from the general fund to the CRA for the cost of 4 wayfinding signs that are located outside the CRA. Locations are as follows: southwest corner of the intersection of Bradshaw and 441, north side of US 441 in front of Charlie's Cheesesteaks in front of the Apopka Land Regional Shopping Center, north side of State Road 436 near the intersection of Sheeler Avenue in front of Empire Sheds, and Park Avenue in front of the part of the facilities maintenance building. Total cost of the 4 signs is $35,544.92, or $8,886.23 per sign. This figure is provided from the sign contract of 5 signs. He said this also included the design and the fabrication of the signs as well. The recommended motion is adoption of the resolution to reimburse the CRA $35,544.92 for the cost of the 4 wayfinding signs. This also includes purchase order rollovers in the amount of $282,947 for the total budget amendment of $318,492.
Any questions for Bobby?
How did this happen?
There
How did we get
was
the signs out of the CRA?
So the signs were approved through Resolution 2022-52, November 16th, 2022, and that was to create the wayfinding signage master plan. And it says the funding source was CRA and general fund.
Who selected the CRA board selected the location?
There was a master plan that was drawn up. The engineer of record sent me the permit drawings from FDOT. There were 14 signs, and apparently the locations included CRA and areas outside the CRA as well.
But they were CRA and general funds.
Yes, ma'am.
So it just seems like the funds got crossed or
Correct.
something when the signs were being placed.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Member Drago, you good?
No, I guess for the residents that are here are anxious for the next meeting. Mayor, I'll move to adopt resolution 20. No, take that back. I make a motion to read by title only and adopt resolution 2025-01.
Got a motion by Member Drago, second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries unanimously. All right, any old business? If not, we're going to adjourn.
Mayor, before
Okay.
we adjourn, let me ask one
Sure.
question. Is it possible for us to go ahead and send out RFPs for contractors for this project before we approve it? Or do we need to wait until then? I mean, I'm trying to
Be ahead of the game.
Yes, if we can go ahead and send out RFPs so we have those when we come back.
What we can do is begin working on the scope.
Yeah.
And what exactly we want them to do.
Right.
So-
You could start preparing a package, but for example, we still haven't settled on a number. That's relevant. You all need to approve the agreement that we're going to expect contractors to sign regarding payment. You all have to approve it. You've seen a draft of it, the Exhibit D that I showed you tonight. And so all of those things would be a part of the RFQ, because what we're telling people is if you're selected as one of the providers, this is what you have to agree to, and these are the amounts that will be available to you.
Okay, so you can go ahead and start working on the scope.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
All right, everybody good?
Just is someone going to make sure that we both get Exhibit D?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
And one other thing, Mayor,
Sure.
I know the city attorney is going to get my email and phone number and Member Williams, but in return, I've asked for the city attorney's email and phone number and not received it. So I think Member Williams and myself need the city attorney's phone number and email address.
Sure. Got it. Coming your way. All right. We'll be back in 5 minutes.